So thank you so much for coming to our HunterWiSE event. It's great to be in person and having food. That's a good tick for in-person events, I think. Yeah, so we've got our HunterWiSE event today. I'll kick off with the Acknowledgement of Country. Okay. This one. Technical difficulties. Well, I'd like to acknowledge the Hvac people as the traditional owners of the land in Newcastle, and Newcastle also has the traditional name of Multidisciplinary, which translates into the land of seafarers. And when we're at the University of Newcastle on the Cavanagh campus, we also say that we're in the Paddalong clan, and that information came from Professor John Maynard, who is an Aboriginal historian, a Wanneroo man, and he did research into who originally lived in that Callahan region. And it's funny because the Paddalong clan actually translates into fig swamp, which I think is appropriate for the Callahan wetland campus. A beautiful campus it is. So we pay respects to the wisdom of elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to all First Nations people joining today, and also acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded. Okay, next slide. So we are HunterWiSE. I'm a bit of an honorary member. I'm not one of the founding members, but I've been involved in this wonderful organisation for a couple of years now. There's two sort of things that are the flagships of the HunterWiSE program. The first is the schools program. So schools outreach program, where we're going into schools, engaging with women, young girls, and trying to get them involved in STEM and in engineering, science and maths. And then we also have this side of it, which is the networking side, which is the event side, where we highlight issues that are important to women in STEM and also show what we can do in STEM as leaders in our field. So that's a little bit of a brief snapshot on HunterWiSE. We've got a lot of interesting things to get through this morning, so we'll keep it nice and short. So to begin, we've got our first quick speaker here. We've got Phil Pilgrim from GHD. So Managing Director of Northern New South Wales. GHD has been a very generous HunterWiSE sponsor for several years, providing support for the HunterWiSE Schools Outreach Program. GHD have provided the space today and in-kind support for organising the event. Phil, if you'd like to say a few words to begin.
We've got some people on the camera, I think, have we? Thanks, Jessica, and welcome everyone. Welcome to GHD. Great to see you all here in person. Great acknowledgement of country. The room we're in this morning, you might notice on the plaque over there, is called Navalaba, which is the Wabbegal word for place of teaching and learning. So I'm sure you're going to do a lot of learning today with our esteemed panel here, Catherine, Kate, and Mirella. So thanks very much for your time this morning. From a housekeeping point of view, in the unlikely event that we're asked to evacuate, I might just ask you all to make your way just past the door you came through as you exit the lift bay, the fire stairs just to the right, as are the bathrooms. So looking for them, that's where they are as well. In closing, big thanks to the HunterWiSE crew that are here. It's a privilege to be involved with HunterWiSE, and also like to acknowledge the reps from the other sponsors. I can see a couple in the room, I think. So big thanks to the other sponsors as well. So that's it for me. I'll hand back to you, Jessica. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Phil. Yes, HunterWiSE would not be very far along without our excellent sponsors. So thank you to Phil, and thank you for everyone in the audience today who's involved. So I believe I was asked to MC this event because I like to think I have a multidisciplinary mindset, and it's something I strive towards. So I have an engineering undergraduate, and then I have a chemistry PhD, and I've also worked in industry as a professional engineer and also within academia. And it's my belief that the difficult and challenging ideas that we are faced with in this world, whether they be small or large, we're not going to be able to tackle those without multidisciplinary lenses. And the best teams are diverse teams, diverse in every sense of the word. In terms of the people that make up the team, their backgrounds, but also the disciplines and ideas that they bring into that team. So this event, the multidisciplinary mindset, is really about trying to understand how to embrace that way of thinking and what sort of benefits that a multidisciplinary approach can really bring to a team, to an idea, to a project. So to kick off, we're going to start off with Catherine Pepper. So Catherine is the Manager of Environment and Sustainability at Maitland City Council. And we'll start off with just, if you can say a little bit about yourself, Catherine, a little bit of background, and then also about what you think about this multidisciplinary mindset, and if you can share your experiences of working in multidisciplinary teams. So I'll hand over to you, Catherine.
Okay, so I stand here-ish. They can sort of see me a little bit on the screen, which is always important. It's really great to be here and lovely to have met some of you before we started today, and to be back at GHD, where I used to work for a few years, but I'm now up at Maitland leading the environment and sustainability team. And I'd like to start by acknowledging that I'm an engineer, but there have been engineers in this land since time immemorial. So Australia's first peoples were in fact first engineers and scientists. And to quote a young engineer from the Uni of New South Wales, she said, "Our ancestors are the original engineers. They have a deep knowledge and understanding of the land and the sky. They use their knowledge to form a lifestyle, innovating to solve everyday problems and to live comfortably." And I think that's an amazing vision of what we can strive for and learn to be living together in this land. And I want to pay my respects to both elders past, present and emerging, and any Aboriginal people here with us today. So I'm a smart and sustainable cities leader, which I think is a really exciting challenge, and it's something I've been passionate about for a really long time. I work up at Maitland on the land of the Wanneroo people, where I lead a team of around about 40, and we look after all things environment and sustainability, one would say. I would suggest that we're just creeping our way into that space at the moment. So some of the areas we look after are waste and the emerging field of circular economy. We look after the sustainable built environment, or our aspiration to have the sustainable built environment, particularly thinking about energy and water efficiency, renewable energy and sustainable transport in all its forms, and the smart cities technology that goes around that. Also, we are moving into this concept of the green and blue grid. So managing our bushland, wetlands, waterways, and our green spaces in urban areas, including tree canopy, and how we can live in more of a balance, I guess, with the natural environment, but also gain a lot of benefit from the natural environment by integrating it into our cities. We also look after community resilience to natural hazards, including changing climate, which is, I wish I had a team of 100 just to look at that piece, and it's a growing field that I think we're all working in. Any of us who are scientists, engineers, or practitioners of any kind are needing to think about how we're sort of moving into this space of preparing for and adapting to that changing climate. It needs everybody's effort, I think, to look at how can we both develop sustainable ways of working, but also support our most vulnerable members of the community, both here in Australia and around the world, to adapt. And some of that adaptation is going to be really challenging. We've already seen that in Lismore in terms of the intensity of that flooding, which we know is made worse because of the extra energy that's now kind of in the atmosphere that creates more intense storm events, etc. That challenge is a big challenge for us, I believe, as engineers and scientists. There's a lot I could say about the challenge before us, but I guess to just give you a snapshot, in Maitland at the moment, we're delivering about 1,000 new houses per year, and the population growth expected in the Maitland local government area between now and 2040 is about 30,000 people. We're at about 85,000 people now, so significant growth. And what my team looks at, and the group that I'm a part of, the Planning and Environment Group, is how do we build a city that's equipped for the future, and how do we support the community that is in Maitland now, but also that will move into Maitland over the next 20 years? How do we support them to be resilient, to live meaningful lives where they have access to the things that they need, and have a positive experience of engaging with their environment, including access to jobs, access to recreation spaces, access to healthcare, transport, all of the things that you need, schools, etc., to live a great life. And look, I just wanted to give an example of how the multidisciplinary space is really important for us. So on Monday, we had a workshop session to look at reframing our urban design guidelines to deliver a 30% tree canopy coverage across all our new urban release areas. So today, in Maitland, on average, we have 15% canopy cover, but in some of our newer suburbs, the amount of tree canopy cover is as low as 5%. What that means is there's basically no shade. There's a lot of hard surfaces, so it can be really hot in summer. And we're now developing out into the westernmost part of our local government area. So it's hotter because it's further from the coast. So there's a real challenge for people's livability related to urban heat. And trees are one of the important tools in our toolkit to improve outcomes in terms of shade, to reduce the amount of energy people need to spend to cool their homes. And we also know that being able to see green space is good for our mental health. So some really important wellbeing indicators there. So in that workshop session, we had, let me just read them for you, urban designers, development planners, recreation planners, subdivision engineers, ecologists, arborists, and sustainability officers, all trying to look at, all right, well, how would you redesign a subdivision in terms of our guidelines to be able to deliver 30% canopy cover? And it's not an easy thing to do, and it requires all of them thinking from different perspectives. Things like, how wide do you need to make the verge so there's enough space for the root ball so that the tree can grow tall enough to have enough canopy cover to actually deliver shade? It sounds really simple. Actually, it's kind of complicated, because once we then have those technical workshops, I need to then work with our communications and engagement team, our organizational development team, and our finance team to look at how we're going to fund this, how we're going to communicate about this, how we're going to bring our development industry on this journey when fundamentally what we're asking them to do is change the way that they deliver a subdivision. We need all of those disciplines to bring that to life. Just to finish, just a couple of thoughts on the tools that you need in your toolkit when you're working in this kind of multidisciplinary space. The first one for me is empathy. Sometimes when we're doing this work, we are painting a vision of a future city, but we're also critiquing the city we have now. So often I'm saying to my colleagues who've worked at council for 30 or more years, it's not actually that great. How you do that is really important if you're going to build long-term relationships and deliver something better. So it's not just about going, nah, that's crap, even though some days I'd really like to say that, but having that empathy about how someone who's worked in one place for a long time might need to be brought on the journey, but also that their perspective might be valid, even though you come with a particular perspective. I've been at Maitland Council for 2 years, so it's easy for me to go, no, we can do it better. But actually listening as well. That's the second thing really important in your toolkit, that active listening, so that you are hearing other perspectives and not just going, that's nice, but then actually being flexible in creative ways. So creative flexibility, stopping and actually going, I need to exist in this space of uncertainty and hearing a different perspective so that we can come up with new ways of doing things. Because I personally don't have all the answers. I'm an engineer. I also have a degree, an arts degree in geography and an urban planning degree, but I certainly don't know everything. As soon as I assume I know everything, we're stuffed. So that humility is another really important piece of your toolkit. And the other thing that I would say is tenacity. So the problems that we're facing as a planet right now are pretty overwhelming. I think, I talk to my colleagues and the people who report to me about climate anxiety and about what their kids talk to them about and how uncertain people feel at the moment. One thing that I think is really important is our own resilience, but our ability to be tenacious. So to remember why it is that we're doing this. So for me, why I do this is because I believe a better world is possible, and I believe that humanity, and in fact, all of the planet, our ecology, our ecosystems are of inherent worth. And for me, that's the driving force that allows me to be tenacious and keep on going even when it's really difficult. So there's a few thoughts from me about multidisciplinary approaches.
Thank you so much, Catherine. And what an amazing note to end on, that note of hope, which, as you say, is really hard to hold on to. I think it's funny, the key qualities that you've listed, so empathy, active listening, and humility. Let's reflect on those for a second. I think that's something that not everybody has, and it can make it quite challenging to work in a multidisciplinary mode. So I'll just, one question to you before we move on to our next speakers. How do you meet that challenge to, you know, you have those skills and you're building those skills, you understand that they're needed, but the people that you're working with, that you're bringing together in a multidisciplinary team, maybe aren't quite there yet. How do you bring them in?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I think in management, it's definitely one of our big challenges is helping people to develop emotional intelligence. Thankfully, EQ is something that you can learn, and it's something that I think, first of all, it needs to be modeled. People need to see it. They need to see it in action. And then providing feedback for people. So when there are times when they're maybe not super empathetic, I have an ecologist who is so passionate, but he's not particularly empathetic towards engineers. So we need to sometimes have conversations about that and, you know, identify that it's okay to try something and maybe not get it perfectly right. But what we need to do is share feedback and learn and create spaces where team members can talk to each other, not just me imposing what I think, but actually starting to create those spaces where different people can share their experience of trying to work together. And that takes a long time, because you also need to get, you know, because typically when you're dealing across disciplines, you're also dealing across different teams. So I deal a lot with the, you know, subdivision engineers and the works engineers. So getting their managers on board is something I have to do, so that those team members, when they have conflicts, can work it out. Yeah, rather than just going to their managers and then the managers having to work
help
it out.
them see the value in it so that they can be on board with it.
Yeah, so it's a big organizational development piece, I think, but starting with, you know, learning by doing and providing feedback and being open to, you know, getting it wrong and then learning is important.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Catherine. All right, we'll move on to our next speaker now. So now we have Kate Cavanagh from CSIRO. So you can come up or sit down, however you're most comfortable. That's good. Yep. So you've worked at CSIRO for more than a decade in previous roles, in various roles, and presumably many different teams. So can you share a little bit about your professional experience, cross-disciplinary collaboration, and also a bit about your background and bio would be great.
Okay, great. So as you said, I'm Kate Cavanagh, and I originally started in science. I wanted to go into research. So I studied organic chemistry, and then that gave me, you know, a role in Melbourne, looking at drug design and synthesis to target Alzheimer's disease. And as interesting as that was, it's quite slow in pharma. So when an opportunity, because I'm originally from New South Wales, an opportunity in energy came up, I sort of jumped on it. And it's very exciting and very fast paced. Like when you are doing laboratory work, it takes more than a week to design, make, and test a compound. But when I walked into the energy sector, like my fellow engineers pick up a multimeter and tap them on their little switchboard, and it's like, done. So yeah, that was an interesting step for me. So I work at CSIRO here in Newcastle, and I lead the research facilities essentially, and we work in renewable energy and storage and the integration into the electricity grid. We have a facility where we're looking at battery energy systems in terms of the whole system. So from the battery itself to the inverter to its application within the grid. So you may have heard the term virtual power stations or virtual power plants. That's something that we can feed into. I lead a team of multiple disciplines. And not only are we in Newcastle, we are also in Melbourne and in Brisbane. So it's very geographically dispersed. But that dispersion also brings diversity of thought as well. So we have software engineers, we have project managers, and we even have social scientists. One of the other facilities that we have in Newcastle is a Hvac Lab. So Hvac being heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. And this lab is accredited to test minimum energy performance standards of air conditioners. You might relate to that in the stickers on the air conditioner at home, like the little star rating. The clients, or various clients that come to us that we perform this testing for, they're generally interested in, well, one, compliance. Do the air conditioners do what they claim to do? But also interested in the reduction of energy demand on the grid. And this is quite, it can be quite a big load that you can target and reduce. So it's kind of like a bit of low-hanging fruit. But the distributed energy resources, as the air conditioners can be, there's one way, it's more of a technical solution, to reduce the demand that they draw. And that is, turn it to 23 degrees. 23 degrees. If that is too cold, put a jumper on. If it's too hot, take a jumper off. So it's easy thing. It's something that anyone can do to contribute to a reduction in their energy use, but also their action towards climate change, as Catherine has mentioned. But in that equation, like, it's solved, right? Turn the air conditioner 23 degrees. What's missing in that equation? People. Yes. And as I alluded to, we also have social scientists where we look at that human behavior and interaction. What are the drivers of that behavior? And then how to influence so that we can save the planet. The energy transition is a massive challenge. I don't want to scare you, but it's really large. And energy is very topical. And you'll see in the public discourse that energy affordability, reliability, security, and sustainability is quite topical, and people are quite passionate about it. But to